All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Just a few hours ago, the Secretary General arrived in Lviv, where tomorrow he will join President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan in a meeting hosted by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy of Ukraine, as we mentioned to you yesterday. And just a reminder that he will go on to visit Odesa and then Istanbul in the following days. The Special Envoy of the Secretary General on Myanmar, Noeleen Heyzer, met with State Administration Council Chairman Senior General Min Aung Hlaing in Nay Pyi Taw today in her first visit to Myanmar as Special Envoy. She discussed in person the pragmatic steps to de-escalate the violence, address the multidimensional crisis, and advance unfettered humanitarian assistance free of discrimination to all people in need. Her visit follows her extensive consultations with actors from across the political spectrum, civil society, and communities affected by the conflict. In a statement, the Special Envoy said that her visit was to convey the concern of the United Nations and to propose concrete steps needed to reduce the conflict and suffering of the people. UN engagement does not in any way confer legitimacy, she added. Ms. Heyzer stated that any progress in Myanmar depended on an end to the violence and visible and significant improvements in the lives of people on the ground. Following the recent death sentences carried out against pro-democracy activists that the United Nations has strongly condemned, the Special Envoy directly urged the Senior General to impose a moratorium on all future executions. She also reiterated the Secretary General's call for the release of all political prisoners. The Special Envoy raised her request for a meeting with State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi following her latest sentencing. She added that she was deeply concerned about Aung San Suu Kyi's health and well-being in her current situation and requests that she can return home soon. We have more details in a press release. In Sri Lanka, our team, led by Resident Coordinator Hana Singer Hamdi, signed today with authorities a new roadmap to advance the Sustainable Development Goals in the next 5 years, the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. This aims to revitalize economic activities, also impacted by the pandemic, and improve social services, decent employment, social cohesion, health, and well-being for all people. Our team is also supporting Sri Lanka's most immediate needs to prevent a humanitarian crisis, targeting 1.7 million people with healthcare and essential medicines. In addition to the $38 million that our team has raised, the development framework further injects an estimated $60 million from the UN team's core budget allocations, and we thank our member states for this essential contribution, also bringing an additional $325 million through other resources in the next 5 years. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, is concluding her visit to Bangladesh, where she met with Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and other officials, as well as representatives of civil society. You can find more details on her visit online. Also in Bangladesh, our UN team, led by Resident Coordinator Gwyn Lewis, continues to support authorities to tackle the impacts of the pandemic on the health, social, and economic fronts. With our colleagues' support, nearly 300 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines have been administered. That covers over 76% of the population. About 65% of all these vaccines were provided through the COVAX facility. Our team is also supporting authorities to deliver hybrid educational modalities with the continued use of distance learning. Also backed by the UN, authorities are monitoring the safe reopening of schools while boosting school curricula with catch-up programs and an extended school calendar. At a press conference today, the Special Representative of the Secretary General for the Central African Republic, Valentin Rugwabiza, outlined progress in the peace process, notably the June strategic review organized with support from the UN mission, MONUSCA, and regional partners. She also highlighted the importance of the first coordination meeting on the implementation of the peace accord and the Luanda roadmap for peace that was held earlier this month. MONUSCA is continuing in its efforts to deter armed groups and protect civilians, including through joint deployments with national forces to Wanda Jale, Bakuma, and as of this week, Samunja, near the border with Sudan, where the situation remains calm. The Special Representative has also met with communities and local authorities, undertaking joint visits with government officials to Bambari, Bria, and Bosongoa, and working with media to counter disinformation and hate speech, which, he said, are at odds with the political process and reconciliation efforts. From Yemen, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that heavy rainfall and flooding in recent weeks has affected over 200,000 people across 16 governorates, with displacement sites particularly impacted. Local authorities report that 77 people, including children, have been killed between late July and early August as a result of the flooding. We and our humanitarian partners are working to support the worst affected families with shelter, food assistance, water, sanitation, and hygiene services, and other critical supplies. However, agencies are limited due to a severe lack of funds, with many of the main sectors for the floods response critically underfunded. This includes the Camp Coordination and Camp Management Cluster, which has received less than 1% of its required funding for this year, and the Rapid Response Mechanism Cluster, which has not received any of its required funding. Early warning reports from the Food and Agriculture Organization warn of continued heavy rainfall up to the 20th of August in many of the already affected areas, with up to 20,000 people estimated to be affected. We encourage all donors to increase support for Yemen's humanitarian response plan. And turning to Chad, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that torrential rains have killed 22 people and destroyed more than 2,000 hectares of farmland since June. More than 110,000 people throughout the country are impacted, according to authorities. This number is expected to rise. The city of N'Djamena has the largest number of flood-affected people, with more than 41,000. We, along with our partners, are supporting the government in providing emergency assistance of food, shelter, malaria management, and other critical help. Our humanitarian colleagues note that the humanitarian needs prior to the floods were only funded at 34% as of mid-August. $171 million received out of $510 million needed. A comprehensive response plan has been launched today with support from OCHA, and we're calling on donors for their support. And that is it for me. Are there any questions? Yes, Edie.
Thank you, Farhan. I read the release and the statement that came out from Noeleen Heyzer's meeting with the senior general in Myanmar, in which she made quite a number of points. But there is nothing in that release that gives us any indication of what the reaction was from the senior general. Can you give us any reaction? For example, she asked to meet Aung San Suu Kyi and made quite a number of other points.
As her trip is actually ending, she was not able to meet with Aung San Suu Kyi during this trip, although her request stands, and she hopes both that Aung San Suu Kyi will be released from her conditions of detention and that she will be able to see her at a future time. Regarding the reactions from the general, of course, we don't speak for the other side, but there was a good discussion. We will see in the future whether our key demands, including, for example, a moratorium on executions and the release of those who are politically detained, will be carried out. Of course, we've been making these requests for some time now, but we're going to continue to push on those points.
So she's already left Myanmar. Is she back in Singapore? Where is she?
She put out the statement as she was departing, so she will be departing, I believe, in the coming hours. Yes, Edward and then Murad.
A couple of questions. First, a follow-up on the Secretary General's itinerary in Ukraine. After Lviv, when the Secretary General talked to the Turkish President Erdoğan and President Zelenskyy, he will travel to Odesa. I was wondering, would there be any senior Ukrainian officials accompany him to go there?
Well, the logistics of his travel are still being determined, so I wouldn't be able to provide anything definitive. But the point of the Odessa trip is to see the workings of the port of Odessa and see how the ships are able to depart as part of the follow-up to the deal that he, as you know, initiated with the presidents of Ukraine and Russia in April.
And second question. Yesterday, Turkey's communication director of the presidency, Farhan, said in the panel in Paris that UN failed to develop I quote this, UN failed to develop concrete solutions to prevent the great humanitarian disasters, particularly in the post-Cold War period. And unfortunately, it would not play an effective role in sustaining peace and security. He also, end of quote, and he also said it's desperate to prevent human tragedies in Bosnia, Herzegovina, Rwanda, Syria, and Kosovo region, and now also similar desperation in Ukraine. And he also called to reform UN Security Council, and he called it the deadlock, which is unfair and non-transparent. So first, any comments from the UN? And second, since tomorrow the Secretary General will meet with the Turkish President Erdoğan, would they discuss something related to the reform of the United Nations? Thank you.
We will be able to provide details of the Secretary General's tripartite meeting once he talks to the press, as he is scheduled to do at some point tomorrow, and we'll provide you the details of that when that happens. I'm not going to get into a back and forth with the different officials about the comments of the United Nations. Obviously, from time to time, the United Nations is used to criticism. What I would ask you to do is to look at the record of what the UN has done in all of the various crises that you've mentioned to try to ameliorate the situations. And we have a clear track record of using both our diplomacy and our humanitarian efforts to improve situations on the ground when wars arise, as they did frequently, including during the Cold War. Murad.
Thank you, Farhan. On Mali, the government of Mali has requested an emergency UN Security Council meeting to stop what it calls French acts of aggression. Does the SG have any message to ease this tension or any position regarding that?
Well, our mission on the ground, MINUSMA, is working with the Malian authorities to deal with any of the tensions that are occurring on the ground. Regarding an emergency meeting of the Security Council, of course, that is a question up to the members of the Security Council to decide whether they will hold anything on that. Yes, Gregory.
Thank you very much, Farhan. On grain deal, how to respond to food crisis in Africa, in poorest countries, further, due to the fact that only one ship went to Africa right now, and so how to keep food prices continue down? Thank you.
Well, the traffic of all of the ships as a whole eases up the pressure on world food prices. So even the ships that are not bound for Africa are helping to lower food prices overall, which is a help to the world. But we are trying to get more food to go to Africa. You're aware, of course, of the travel of the brave commander, which has been chartered to go there as part of the mission of the World Food Program. But as more ships are able to come in to the ports and come out, we will be having more of them travel to places in need. Yes, Ray.
Thank you, Farhan. I have follow-up on Murad's question. Mali officials, when requesting Security Council about Mali, they say that France is supporting jihadist groups and spying. Does the Secretary General have any information about that? Or, France is an active member of Security Council. Do you have any details about that?
This is nothing on which we have extensive comment. The basic point is that we have been extremely appreciative of the involvement of France and French forces in operations, including Operation Farhan, to stabilize the situation in Mali. And we hope that any of the other countries involved with the Malian authorities will similarly try to play a stabilizing role. Kristen.
I was actually going to ask about Mali as well. I was just wondering if there's concern on the part of the Secretary General that this indicates given there were issues in the last week with getting troops in, and now there's this letter coming. Is this a sign of things getting more intense? How would you characterize the situation and the concern?
Obviously, the situation in Mali has had many different tensions, including the activity by armed groups. At the same time, we've seen some real progress in the relationship between the UN mission, MINUSMA, and the Malian authorities. In recent days, both the Senegalese troops and the Bangladeshi troops have been able to rotate forces. And so this is a resumption, a return to normalcy in terms of troop rotations that we've been trying to get for many months. And of course, our head of peacekeeping operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, was recently in Mali and had talks with the de facto authorities. So we're trying to move ahead and work with them to resolve any of our longstanding concerns. Yes.
Farhan, one follow-up on the Secretary General's meeting tomorrow with the Turkish and Ukrainian presidents. Is there going to be a media availability, some kind of a press conference with all three of them afterwards?
Again, the details on this are very fluid, so I don't want you to hold me to this, but we are trying to set something like that up, and hopefully there will be a press availability that does involve the three leaders.
Okay, and secondly, obviously, we've been talking about a lot of other health issues. Polio's been recurring even in this country. And I wondered if the Secretary General had any comment on two policemen guarding two people giving polio and vaccinations in northwest Pakistan who were shot dead.
No, it's been disturbing for some time when there are attacks either on vaccinators or on people who are protecting vaccinators. So we want to make it very clear that vaccines are helpful. Vaccines are very frequently necessary in terms of avoiding pandemics and other major epidemics. And we want to make sure that all of those who are involved in the process of disseminating vaccinations are adequately protected. And if there are no further questions, Oscar Bolaños, and then Alan after that. Oscar.
Yes, thank you, Farhan. Farhan, just to follow up a question that I asked about the situation is happening in Nicaragua and the tension that is between the Catholic Church and the government of Daniel Ortega. And this is increasing with the closing of several Catholic radio stations and the tension of priests and church members. And besides other actions against the church, is there any reaction still from the Secretary General? What's his comments on that? You have any comment on that situation in Nicaragua?
Well, we've had concerns overall about the human rights situation in Nicaragua, including those that have been expressed by the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, and in particular. She's made clear in recent weeks her concerns about the dramatic reduction of civic space in the country and has urged the government of Nicaragua to uphold its human rights obligations and to cease any policies that are isolating its people from the region and from the international community. Alan?
Thank you very much, Farhan.
Thank you.
Could you please disclose a little bit what is the SG aiming to achieve during his trilateral and bilateral negotiations in Lviv?
Well, he's made clear the issues that have been of concern regarding Ukraine. So he's dealing with issues including the movement of ships and the food and grain issue. the concerns about the nuclear power plant at Zaporizhia, the concerns about any fact-finding activity concerning Olenivka prison, and also his overall efforts to do what he can to essentially lower the temperature as much as possible with the various authorities. And so those will be part of his discussions, and you'll hear more from him hopefully tomorrow. And if that's it, I wish you all a very good afternoon.